Oh, it's good to have your company. My name's Simon Smart.
And I'm Justine Toh.
You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. Well, the phrase, "it's a girl," is usually a cause for great celebration, but in too many parts of the world, it is instead a grim death sentence. This is a pretty sobering topic we're talking about tonight. The United Nations estimates that some 200 million girls are missing in the world today because of gendercide, or the elimination of women for being female. And too many of those girls are thought to be the victims of sex-selective abortion that's carried out in cultures that favour boys over girls. We learn of these shocking statistics in a documentary that's been going around the traps called "It's a Girl." It's been shown around the world. It's hoping to raise awareness and to inspire people to action. Let's have a listen to part of the trailer of that documentary.
Today, India and China eliminate more girls than the number of girls born in America every year.
The definition of genocide is a systematic and methodical extermination of a certain group. And the gendercide is that systematic and methodical extermination of a gender group.
Why are Indian households secretly and brutally eliminating daughters from their family system?
They just wet the cloth and they fold it like this and they put it on the face so the child can't breathe. Immediately the child will die.
Now, Justine, you were at the Sydney screening of this film. What did you think about it?
Well, it's pretty shocking. I mean, you know what it's about before you go there, but to be confronted with the stories of women and men who've been put in these really horrible situations, and of course, you know, think of the girl children who are discarded, really. It's just really terrible to think about. And it really struck me watching it that, you know, we live in such a bubble over here in the West. I mean, things go on here that aren't great as well, but it's quite different to the idea that this is almost systematic kind of elimination of women that goes on all around you, and it's something that everyone has a stake in. You know, it's so pervasive in that culture. It's really quite shocking to think about.
Now, I understand Melinda Tankard Reist was at this event. We've talked to Melinda before. Melinda runs an organisation called Collective Shout, which is a grassroots campaign against the sexualisation of children.
Yeah, but her work also seems to go beyond that as well. I didn't know about it, and when I had a quick interview with her, she actually told us about it. So here's what she had to say. At the end of "It's a Girl," we hear that there are more women have died as a result of gendercide, 200 million. That's actually more than all the genocides of the 20th century. It's really appalling when you put it in those terms, isn't it?
It's unspeakable. It's just such a grave human rights violation that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. I actually think we need to reframe this and start talking about femicide. I think when we talk about gendercide, perhaps the true meaning doesn't strike home. It's about femicide. It's about the systematic eradication of women and girls around the world. It just needs a lot more attention. It needs a lot more international collaboration and effort from governments. For example, Australia funds China's population control program. We fund ultrasound machines that determine sex. We're all embedded, really. We fund the United Nations Population Fund, which has underpinned China's population control for a long, long time. So actually, our taxes have helped to support this barbarism.
The lady at the end, Rita Banerjee, she was saying that that we all need to look in the mirror and examine ourselves. And as you've said, you know, our taxes are going towards paying for these forced abortions, perhaps, or even just the sex determination material. So is that something that we all need to do? I mean, we kind of tend to come to these sorts of events and say, oh, that happens across the world. But is it just about, no, it starts at home as well?
Absolutely. And this is something I'm very strong about, is pointing out what happens here. Trafficking happens here. We have had cases of female genital mutilation happening in Australia. Violence against women is just massive also in this country. 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted. So there's a lot we need to address here also. I was just talking to some mates of mine about some work I did when I worked in politics, and we helped to get asylum actually for a lot of Chinese women who were pregnant and were going to be sent back to a forced abortion or forced sterilisation. And what everyone forgets, because people have short memories, is that at that time the then Labor government under Nick Bolkus introduced something called Migration Legislation Amendment Bill number 4, which said that Chinese women who were pregnant illegally and had come to Australia could not get asylum, could not be considered as members of a particular social group under the Refugee Convention and were ineligible for protection in this country. We actually sent back a woman, everyone forgets this, called Zhu Qingping at 9 months gestation under Amanda Vanstone. 9 months gestation. She said, please don't send me back until the baby is born. At least allow me to have this illegal child safely in Australia, and then if you need to send me back, send me back. But if you send me back, this child will be murdered. That's exactly what happened. She was sent back to China, aborted on arrival, then given the bill for the abortion. I have a copy of it. And she tried to kill herself. They killed her baby boy at 9 months and she begged not to be sent back. We are complicit. We are implicated. She's not the only woman that we sent back. This is going back, we're talking about 10 years ago, where we documented many, many cases of women being sent back to forced abortion and forced sterilisation. So we have contributed to this grave human rights violation in China, which continues to this day.
One of the shocking parts of It's a Girl is it opens with an Indian woman who has strangled 8 of her girl children. It's easy to, I guess, criticise her, but once you take in all the different factors into account, the devaluation of women in that culture, then it's a bigger picture, right?
Absolutely. You can't look at this issue in individual terms. One thing that troubled me about that opening of the film, and it was a powerful film, but it said she killed 8 girls because she wanted a boy. We have to look at the cultural context for that. You cannot look at this individual woman in isolation. I saw a review in The Independent that said, you see this woman laughing as she's describing what she did to these little girls. No, she is totally influenced and conditioned and socialised by the culture. She will be punished for not producing a boy. We can't even in our Western privileged elitist position understand what life is like for that woman. And it did concern me the way that it was she wants this, she wants that, so she did that. She's totally operating out of a cultural context, a cultural pressure, a cultural demand that's what she has to do. And she will probably be killed if she doesn't do those things. So we can't individualise this. We have to totally deconstruct the culture here and put the blame on the culture. I would never blame those individual women. My life is so privileged. I have three daughters. It's a Girl was 3 words of joy to me when I had my 3 daughters. We cannot possibly envision and imagine what life is like for those women when those 3 words operate as a curse.
Well, It's a Girl, that was a cause for immense celebration in my household when my daughter was born some years ago now. It's hard for me to think, impossible actually, to think of those words being a curse. Melinda Tankard Reist says that we need to talk more about what she calls femicide, because it's women who are targeted on the whole, isn't it, Justine?
Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying before, that there is this real systematic elimination of women going on. There aren't just these sex-selective abortions. If you've got a girl, if you're carrying a girl in your womb, then you should have an abortion. But, once a girl is born, if she does make it, then she's more likely to be abused and neglected. It might be the case that if she gets sick, then the parents might withhold medical treatment. So she's allowed to die, if we can put it in those words. And then once women are actually married off, a lot of women tend to die in India of dowry death. This idea that I think the family who she's married into will try and in some ways extort more money from her. And so they'll actually abuse and kind of, harass and intimidate, all these kinds of, terrible practices against her. And that's a leading cause of that systematic, degradation of women. And, the more I think about it, it seems so systematic and pervasive that you almost have to ask, is there a conspiracy against women? Because you think about how, the film doesn't just look at India, but also goes into China, and it talks about the one-child policy. And because, India, like China, emphasises the birth of boys over girls, then girls are the ones who are routinely the ones to suffer in China.
Is there any sense given in the film as to why this is happening? Are there reasons given for why there's a favouring of boys over girls?
Well, there's a sense here that I think, I'm not sure if this is the case in China as well, but in India, it's the boys who are the ones who look after the elderly parents. So there's this sense here that if you have a daughter, she's going to join someone else's family. So there's even a cultural saying that says, if you're raising a daughter, it's like watering your neighbour's garden. If you can put it, it's so horrible. She's just really a drain on the resource. She's going to cost money because you'll have to feed and clothe her. She'll also take money away from you because, you have to pay a large dowry in order to marry her off. So there are those cultural traditions that stand in the way. But what's also really painful to read about is that you see that women are often the enforcers of this brutal system as well. Like, they've actually been socialised and conditioned into accepting the lower worth of women, and so you often see them leading the charge. The mothers-in-law are quite brutal when it comes to making their daughters-in-law have an abortion.
It's just hard to fathom, isn't it? Now let's have a listen to another part of the trailer to the film, It's a Girl. The first voice belongs to Rita Banerjee, an Indian author and gender activist, and the second belongs to another academic, Mitu Khurana, who tells us what happened after she found out she was pregnant.
But what this is an entire system, a social machinery that says we don't want females.
But the real problem started after I became pregnant. They started asking me for a sex determination. They wanted to know if the children are girls or boys. They started torturing me to get an abortion done. What should I do to save my daughters?
You're listening to Life and Faith from the Centre for Public Christianity. We're talking about Gendercide, the elimination of females around the world, and especially this documentary called It's a Girl. Now, we've talked in the past on Life and Faith about the image of God status of every person. The Christian understanding of each person is that we're all representatives of God and part of his family, which makes every single person a precious child of God. This has important implications for the grounds on which you might base people's dignity, their rights, protection and their safety. That seems to have implications for this topic we're talking about today. Those situations recounted in It's a Girl seem to represent this sort of utter devastation of this sense of the image of God in every person, in every woman, at every level. Does the film deal at all with the inherent value of women?
It does do so, but it seems to do so exclusively in secular terms. There's a lot of talk about human rights, which I think this is a really good way to talk about this kind of topic. But it can't avoid this major elephant in the room. Why do we find violence against women so appalling? And why don't other people in the world, why don't other cultures find violence against women appalling? Why do they condone it? Why do they encourage it? So I think what we're seeing here is we seem to be seeing very starkly what happens when you take the basic assumptions of our culture, the inherent value of women, and then you see them completely challenged when you take those assumptions into another culture that actually might view women as chattel, as your neighbour's family. So why would you look after them? And it should make us ask, why is the West different? And of course, people don't want to go there because it sounds like we're saying, the West is more civilized than these other cultures, and that sounds really kind of superior and arrogant,
imperialistic.
Yeah, but I think we should really pay attention to the fact that the West has a specific heritage that actually leads you down this path of valuing women, and we shouldn't be shy about saying that. Even though I can feel like this is not something PC that would be great in the ears of everyone today. Now, I do want to mention that we haven't got it perfect in the West. Women still aren't, let's say, fully equal necessarily, but but broadly, our cultural orientation is one that does value women and treats them equally as men. So we haven't got it right perfectly, but we are on our way, I think.
Well, this idea of the image of God, status of every person, reminds me of this really famous C.S. Lewis quote that talks about the high status of men and women. It seems relevant to this discussion.
There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, art, civilization, these are mortal. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendours. Next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, your neighbour is the holiest object presented to your senses.
Well, Lewis is stressing here the worth and the dignity and the holiness, actually, of every person. And that's the case no matter whether a culture teaches us to value women or not. So the documentary is called It's a Girl. You can follow the film as it goes around the world. Go to www.itsagirlmovie.com. Might be good to check that out. It's been good discussing this with you, Justine. Thanks so much.